Hello, I'm Peter Dawe, and I want to talk to you about a device that I've devised called decision charts. One of the things that I've observed over the years is that people optimize for a very narrow set of criteria, not understanding that when they optimize for one place, it has impacts elsewhere. So what I've done is devised a decision chart where you can put your decision in the context of the wider geography. So what I'm looking at is a two-dimensional chart. On the vertical axis, you have what I call is the geography. That is who or what is affected at ever increasing scale. So at the bottom level is me. Going up is perhaps family, your community, your town, your nation. From our perspective, the West, our cultural region, mankind, animal kind, the biosphere, the universe. So now, when you're making a decision, what you can do is say, well, I'm going to do something about, let's take a classic one at the moment. Let's talk about Brexit. Now Brexit, at least in theory, seeks to maximise the nation. There will be some winners and losers down here, which you can put out there, but there is certainly, in terms of the interest of the general community, is a negative. The EC, the EU, will definitely be compromised. So what we can do is mark up on here. What we can do is mark up on here that something good is in red, something bad is in green. So we might have arguably that it's good for the nation, it's bad for Europe, and it's somewhat mixed down there. And from my personal perspective, it happens to be good. For reasons I won't go into. So what you got here is a way of seeing that when you make a decision, who it's affecting can be charted. The next thing you can do is go on the other dimension, is time. It's a case of when you're optimizing or when there's an impact. So we have here today, and then we can go a week, a month, a year, a decade, a century, millennia, forever. So now when we look at a decision, what we can do is, again, look at, on this decision, am I optimizing for now or for the future? So if I'm making a decision about putting money into a pension, this is a me and my family area, and that actually putting money in the pension is actually negative while you're paying into the pension. You are giving up something. But when your pension kicks in, don't expect to live more than 100 years. When your pension kicks in, you're getting a positive result. So now we can actually work things out on the time. Put the two dimensions together. And now we get a very sophisticated way of looking at decisions and looking at what we're trying to optimize. So taking that pension thing again, we did it's negative and then positive, and it's for family as well. For the country, it's actually, because I'm saving and it's been invested, it's actually quite positive for the country, and arguably because I'm not a burden on the community in my old age, it's actually positive for the country there. And actually that's community, so what I should do is that. Again, beyond a century, it all disappears, so that's great. And beyond the nation, my pension doesn't really make any difference at all. So that's the basic concept of a decision chart. There are other things you can do with this, which are, I think, quite exciting. What you can do is use it to reflect what you've been doing. So potentially what you can do is you can actually put your life's work into this. Potentially you can change this axis to actual years and the effect it has on people. So if you take a person from history, Napoleon, Napoleon from a nation, France point of view, he actually was positive until he got defeated. Then he came back and then he got defeated again. From a world point of view, while he was conquering all these places, that was fairly negative, and a bit positive there and a bit positive there. And there may be, and one of the actions that Napoleon did was create a legal system, Napoleonic legal system, which is very rules-based system, unlike the British common law system. And so one might argue that from a world perspective, he has had an impact. Let's argue that the Napoleon system's a good impact, but he certainly had an impact beyond his death in what he did. And so now what we can do is use this chart of where you have an effect and over what time frame to actually take account of your life. Now, from my perspective, this is really useful because I'm an atheist, and I'm not actually particularly a humanist either. So what I have to do is actually look at my impact on the world over time. But these charts can actually be used to help you understand how people behave. So a classic one is the drug addict. The drug addict, shooting up with heroin. What they are doing is doing a me now that is very bright. So and me, where the very short term is very bright, and actually he's not actually that worried about everyone else, just accept that there's negative there. So what the drug addict do is optimizing at that very narrow place. The person who is, we've already done the pension, where they're optimizing for something further on in their life. Other people may actually be optimizing for things beyond that selfish. So if you take, for instance, David Attenborough, most of his work is actually about making the biosphere better. That's where he's trying to optimize. And generally speaking, he's actually trying to optimize for the future of the biosphere. And he is prepared to actually have some negative impact on the short-term benefits of mankind. When you start doing these charts on political discussions, what you realise is that most politicians are not arguing about whether there should be immigration, whether there should be tax or whatever. What they're actually doing is seeking to optimise on a different picture. So, a green is seeking to optimise up here. A neoliberal is seeking to optimise down here, shorter term and much more human focused. You can now see why they're never going to agree. They've got different priorities, they've got different ambitions. So when these two people start arguing about how pensions should be invested, they're always going to have different things. They might start arguing very vehemently about pensions without actually acknowledging that they're seeking to optimise for different different things. Finally, I'll do a little bit about my personal philosophy and life after death. I've already said that I'm an atheist. I'm not actually particularly a humanist as well, but what one does want to feel that there is some meaning to life. If you look at this chart, what you really want to do is to make this chart as red as possible and to have as little green as possible. So when I was born, changing the time scale, one hopes that my family were quite pleased, and although there was, for my mother, it was a bit painful for a few hours. So we can do that chart, but I do things in my life which have cost. My education has cost my community, my consumption cost the nation, and things like that. That's me growing up. That's my education at the nation. But now, what I like to think is that I've actually contributed to the nation through doing things like the internet, resonance and what have you, up until my death. The exciting bit, from my perspective, is if you think about this chart as being your life, and that's the reckoning, what you can do is actually say, well, actually, some of the stuff that I did during my life continues on. My role in the internet continues on. The other things I do. So potentially, what you have is your chart going beyond your death. And this, I will argue, is the atheist's life after death. For most of this talk, I'm talking about the red being a positive aspect and the green being a negative aspect. And for the most part in this talk, I'm talking about happiness and goodness. However, what we're measuring here can be anything. So we could actually say that this is simply pound signs, so that these are costs and these are costs and these are monetary incomes. Or it could be it could be food, and this is consumption of food and this is production of food, or it could be love, where you are creating love and where you're creating hate or lack of love and things like that. That you have different terms that you're measuring in this. As I say, for the most part, for the rest of the talk, what we're talking about is what I call happiness and goodness. But you can have other parameters.